Okay, welcome to our current YouTube Live. Let's see, I've got a little error message here from YouTube that we're going to try to correct so I can see the chat. Okay, guys, so we've got some great questions today that were submitted before this call. So I'm going to start out with those, and then as folks join in, we'll get started with the conversation here as well. So the first question that came in is from a fellow named John. And he says, I just want to say you're amazing. Thank you, John. He said, I asked a question about losing my dogs last week, and I want to touch on something different. Like I said before, my wife and I can't afford to move out. I've been dealing with a work injury that I had surgery on, and it didn't heal right and is worse now than before. Being home and my wife works from home makes a lot of tension and fighting. I now lost my job, which would have been 29 years in a marriage of 27 years. I'm going to lose my wife, daughter, dogs, house, and all the things I own that I'm going to have to get rid of. I have no job because I'm in the middle of a lawsuit, which I never wanted to happen, and now with all this stress, I can't even function on a job. How do I get through this nightmare? So, John, first I want to just take a moment and really acknowledge the intensity of the loss that you're experiencing. This, you're not alone in this. This is unfortunately more common than anyone would want it to be, that there's often a sequence of multiple losses that all happen at once during divorce. So it's not just the divorce, it's losing a job, it's losing pets, it's losing loved ones, in addition to your wife. So John, the first piece of this for you is going to be to really slow down and breathe and take some time to just acknowledge that there is a lot of grief here, there is a lot of pain here. And so those emotions, they're really valid with everything that you're going through, and we don't want to discount them and rush to a solution. We've got to spend a little time feeling into what you're feeling and being present with that feeling, even though it's difficult. So, John, the first thing I would say is deep breaths. If you're not working with a therapist yet, I would strongly recommend that you do that. Having somebody who can be present with you and those emotions and help you process them will make a huge difference. But then we need to look behind it, right? How do I actually survive it? How do I deal with it? And the very first step for you guys is always, always, always coming back to that nervous system regulation. Right? When we go through these disruptive life events, divorce is a disruptive life event, losing your job is a disruptive life event, losing your home is a disruptive life event. So in divorce, we're going through multiple disruptive life events all at one time. And so the nervous system, you're a human being, it's going to respond by going into fight or flight. But fight or flight was meant to be a response for acute stress, for acute pain. It's not something that we're supposed to be in for an extended amount of time. So when you're going through these events that are going on, and like John shared, he's still living with his wife, right? So there's ongoing fighting, there's ongoing tension. He's being put into fight or flight again and again and again, and he might even find that his system is staying in that state like almost permanently. So fight or flight it's there, it's in us to help us activate, to either fight back or run away from danger in the moment. But when we're chronically activated into it, when we're in fight or flight for weeks, or months or years, it starts to have a lot of really negative impacts. It's a less resourceful state, and it starts to become really harmful. And so John talked about this too. He said, look, like I can't even focus to be on a job. I need one, but I can't be present with it. That's a result of being in chronic fight or flight. And so what that means is that when we go through disruptive life events, we need effective, tangible tools to regulate our nervous systems. Because until John can get out of that fight or flight response, he doesn't have a lot of power to change his circumstances. Right? Again, fight or flight is meant to get us through an acute crisis. It's very non-productive and counterproductive during an ongoing crisis or a series of crises, because now it's making him so stressed and so unable to focus that he can't work, that he can't help but escalate conversations with his soon-to-be ex-wife into arguments, right? And so it's become counterproductive. So John, for you, I would say your number one priority right now is nervous system regulation. Before you try to change the dynamic with your soon-to-be ex, before you try to get a job, before you do anything else, your first task is take care of your nervous system. Because when you start to drop out of fight or flight, that's when you're going to feel like you can breathe again. You're going to feel like you can think clearly again. And that's a really key part. When we're in fight or flight, it changes the parts of the brain that we can consciously access. It narrows our focus. It makes everything, we really can't focus on anything but the problem, but the pain. And so now you're trying to go to work, right? And you're supposed to talk to coworkers or talk to your boss or talk to clients and customers. You can't do any of that when your brain is just hyper-focused, hyper-alert, in pain, focused on the problem. So John has some very real challenges to face. Right? He has loss and he has grief that's going to come up. He has a financial situation that he's in. He has a job situation that he's in. These are all things, John, that you can handle. You can find solutions for all of these things. They do exist. But it's going to be difficult for you to connect to those solutions when you're in this fight or flight response. So our priority has to be get you out of fight or flight. Then we can step back and look at what do you need to do next to take care of yourself financially? What do you need to do next to process your grief, to handle the financial side of the divorce, to sell the house, to succeed in the new job? But that very first step has to be getting out of fight or flight. Guys, I see some folks coming in and joining this call, but I've got a little glitch going on the live stream here, which means that I can't see the chat. So I'm going to attempt to refresh this and see if it lets me see you guys in the chat, because I'd love to chat with you and get some questions. But if this doesn't work, I'll end this stream and I'll start a new one. So let's just see what happens. Okay, guys, so I think the chat is back. Thank you for those of you who were able to stay on with me. Part of the reason I wanted the chat to come back is I want to drop a link here for John. So John, the logical next question is, if what you need is nervous system regulation, how do you do that? I have an entire masterclass that teaches you how to effectively regulate your nervous system, and I just dropped that link in the chat. That would be the next step for you, and having a therapist who can support you in that work is going to make a big difference as well. Okay, so folks that are coming in, welcome to the call. Please give me a wave or a hi in the chat. I've got a couple of questions here from folks that submitted them ahead of time that I'm going through. But if you have any questions about your separation, your divorce, your emotional regulation, those internal states, please drop them in the chat. This is a time to pick my brain. I'm here for you. I'm here to support you, and I'd love to have a conversation with you as we go. Hi, David. Nice to have you on the call. All right, guys. So while you're saying hello and dropping your questions in the chat, I'm going to go on to the next question that was submitted. This is an interesting one, and it was actually submitted by a woman. She says, how often and how long will a man regret filing for divorce from his first wife? I'm married to a man last year who's still waking up in despair. So I think this question is really valuable because it speaks to a phenomena that I see a lot, which is that men go through divorce, and honestly, this is whether they filed or not. This is not unique to a man who regrets filing, because a man who didn't file, who went through a divorce he didn't want, he's going to have a lot of regrets too. He's going to regret his actions, the role that he played in the problems leading up to the divorce. He might have regrets about the way he handled it. So this question of how long does a man hold on to this regret is a really valid one. And what this woman is showing us is that that regret can hang out with you even after you've really moved on, right? This man is remarried. He's made a deep enough connection that he wants to share his life with this new partner, and yet he's still suffering from regret from his first divorce. And guys, I see this a lot in my clients, that they're several years sometimes past divorce, and this emotional pain, regret, shame, guilt, grief is still coming up. And so this woman, and if you're watching or you watch the replay of this call, you're not really asking the right question, right? She said, how often does this happen? How long does it last? Well, it happens a lot, but how long it lasts, this is not something that time fixes.
And I hope everyone on this call will hear this. If you're feeling strong emotions around your divorce, whether you're the one who filed or you didn't want it, this time will not heal these emotional wounds. I cannot tell you how many times every single week I talk to men who are like, it's been 2 years post-divorce. These emotions are still there. It's been 6 years. I've been in a relationship with a new woman for 4 years, for 8 years. I still have this pain. It hasn't gone away. We have this saying, right, that, well, time heals all wounds. It's not true when it comes to these kind of relational wounds that men experience during divorce. So the important question here is not how long is he going to feel this way, but what needs to happen for him to move past this. And the reason that these emotions hang around is because most people, men and women both, don't know how to work effectively with them. So this man is probably, and I could be wrong here, so please take this with a grain of salt. I know just those 2 sentences you shared with me that he's waking up in despair. My guess from the patterns I've seen in my clients is that this man copes with his emotions by suppressing them, right? He sucks it up, he goes to work, he takes care of his kids, he does what he needs to do, he's trying to be a good husband and protector and provider to his new wife, and he's dealing with emotions the way that his dad dealt with emotions, right? He's like, well, I can't do anything about it, I can't go back in time and fix it, so what do? Like, I gotta just get on with life, right? So he's just living, but he has this intense internal pain, right? And she's saying he's waking up in despair. Despair is a very telling word. He's not waking up in anxiety, he's waking up in despair. So anxiety and anger, those emotions and anything in those in that family, like frustration, fear, anything in the anxiety and anger family tells me that somebody's in a fight or flight state. But words like despair, depression, overwhelmed, that tells me that somebody's in a freeze state. And that means that they've been in fight or flight for so long that their brain has basically been like, look, I'm not getting away from this. There's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide, and there's nothing to fight against. So let's just numb out a little bit. Let's just detach and let's hope that we're still alive when this pain goes away, when the threat goes away. So despair is hopeless. And it's like, there's nothing I can do. And of course, that's how a lot of men feel because that divorce was years ago. He can't do anything. She's not listening anymore. She's maybe moved on. He's remarried. So it feels like there's this incredible pain or emptiness or void that there's nothing he can do to fix it. He can't do anything about it. And so the very first step, if you're in this situation or if you love somebody in this situation, they have to recognize what that is and start addressing it. So you can't go back and do anything about the divorce that's over. But what's not over is the emotion, the pain you're feeling, the void you're feeling, the grief you're feeling. That's present. That's happening right here, right now. And our brains think, well, because it's tied to the event, it's tied to the divorce, I need to go back to the divorce to fix the pain I'm feeling now. But your pain's not happening then. It's happening right now. And this is true of any kind of trauma. Trauma is not what happens to us. It's not an event. It's the internal change we experience inside of ourselves in response to something that happened to us. So for this man who's waking up in despair, he is carrying an emotional state in himself right now every morning when he wakes up that started after his divorce or during his divorce. But it's present to him now and today. And that is such an important piece of awareness because we can work with what is happening now. We can deal with what's happening now. We can do something about what's happening now. So it's not true that his divorce created this despair in him. What's creating that despair in him is where his attention is focused today. There's another thing that can be creating it that I'll share in just a minute, but when he thinks about that divorce and tells himself, I made a terrible mistake, I did the wrong thing, I shouldn't have done that, I betrayed my values, I didn't live in accordance to who I know I am, when he's telling himself that and he's focusing his attention and focusing his thoughts on that story now, he's creating that sensation in his body. But that's not always where it starts. Sometimes, and this is very true when we live through something traumatic, the feeling comes first, right? So something happens in the world, maybe it's even in his marriage to this new wife, that reminds him on some subconscious level of the past. She says something his ex used to say. She does something he used to complain about his ex not doing. And it can be these really subtle little triggers, and it reminds him, his subconscious brain, his emotional brain, of his past marriage. So there's a visceral, embodied reaction to something innocent, a word she used, a phrase she said, something she didn't say. And all of a sudden, his body remembers his first marriage. And now that feeling changes the focus of his attention. His brain is like, wait, what's happening? Oh yeah, I feel this. Oh, right, because of my first marriage and my choices there. Now his attention shifts to that focus. So for him to heal, we need to start breaking those patterns and rewiring those reactions. So there's not a set time. This is a very common occurrence, but the key to dealing with it is recognizing that your emotion you're feeling now is now. It's about what's in your body today, where your attention is focused today. You don't have to fix the past to deal with or change something you're feeling in the present moment, but you do have to address it in the present, because if you continue to believe that it's linked to the past in such a way that you can't feel differently unless the past changes, then you're going to keep feeling that way for a very long time, because you can't time travel. We can't go back and change it. So if you're feeling this way because of the past, there's nothing we can do about it. But if you're feeling this way because of where your attention is in the present, and because of these visceral reactions that are wired into your system, well, we can work on both of those. There's things that we can do. Let's see, David, I see some good questions here. So David says, I'm currently 3 months into a separation with my wife of 8 years. We've been together for 13. We have 2 kids, ages 5 and 2.5. Our relationship ended because last spring I found what looked like evidence of cheating. She denied it all summer and manipulated me into reluctantly believing her before I found more evidence that proved the affair had been going on all summer despite my worries. When I confronted her with the new evidence, she continued to gaslight and moved out within a week. Suddenly she has a new dog, new tattoos, just a new life. She's continuing to blame me to her entire family and circle, and there's just no accountability. How do I co-parent with this person I thought I knew for the next 15 years? I loved our life. So David, like I said to John, I don't know if you were with us at the beginning today, even just reading that, you just wrote it, I would ask you to take a deep breath, maybe a couple of them, like a big inhale and a big, because there's a lot of grief here. And before, I'm going to answer your question about how do you co-parent with her, but I'm going to tell you something about this answer. Before it's going to be useful to you, you're going to have to deal with what you're feeling. You loved your life. There is betrayal here. There is probably a sense of being deceived or lied to, or like maybe you didn't actually know this person you thought you knew. There is grief about the life and the future you imagined that's no longer going to happen. There might be resentment, there might be anger, there might be shame or guilt about something you think maybe you should have done differently or could have done differently. So I'm going to give you some thoughts about co-parenting, but I'm going to tell you, if you haven't yet, please go watch that masterclass, start practicing the emotional regulation tools. Because the key to co-parenting is going to be getting regulated yourself. So there's a couple of tricks as well that might help you. When you're going to co-parent with somebody, the most important thing you can do is bring your focus back to your children. Because you have a lot of emotions towards her and her choices, and yet she's also the mother of your children. And so I'd invite you, David, everything that I'm going to share with you right now about co-parenting, look at it through the lens of you're doing this for them, not for her. And there might be a point as you move through this and it's a little more distance from it, where you're able to have some compassion or empathy for her, but this is probably not the time yet. This is new. It's only 3 months separated, and you've been dealing with a lot of lies and betrayal for a long time. So right now, you might be really angry with her. You might be really hurt by her. So whenever you interact with her for now, I'd like you to frame it through, I'm doing this for my kids. And just keep that as your focus. What do my kids need? What is best for them? How do I support them in navigating this? Small children like yours, ages 5 and 2.5, you said. Small children need you to be emotionally engaged with them. That is the most important thing. They need that more than they need you to get along with their mother. They need that more than they need like 50-50 time or enough hours with you. They need it more than they need stability and where they sleep or where they live or what school they go to. They need you to be emotionally present and engaged with them. And so again, that emotional regulation piece is going to be so essential for you. So make sure that you are prioritizing getting support for yourself and regulating your nervous system. Watch my masterclass. You might want to look at coaching or therapy or both, or join a divorce care group, join a men's group. Lean into and don't shy away from investing in support for yourself, because the top thing that your little kids need right now is you to be emotionally engaged and present. And because of everything you've gone through, your nervous system is naturally going to be activated. So that's the number one priority, is get your nervous system regulated so you can be present with your children. And then when it comes to her, you're also going to stay motivated with your kids, because there is going to come a point at some point in your children's life where they wake up one day and they notice themselves behaving like their mother. They're going to say something or do something where they're like, oh my gosh, that's just like my mom. Or they're going to look in the mirror and be like, wow, when did my nose turn into my mom's nose? At some point in their lives, probably 20 years from now, they're going to notice that they have their mother in them. And when that day comes, you don't want them to hate that part of themselves because of the way that you felt towards their mother. This is challenging, but children are very perceptive to our emotional states. And so when one parent is really judging the other, and then the child grows up in that environment, and then later they recognize that other parent in themselves, they're going to transfer that judgment to themselves. So I think just from what you're sharing here, you said, I'm doing my absolute best to prioritize the kids and be respectful in our interactions. I just want to be able to forgive her, and I don't know how to do that without getting accountability from her. Yeah, so David, you're already in the right mindset, and honestly, at just 3 months in, it's really impressive that you can even think that way, and see that that's what's best for your kids. So that already is taking a lot of self-awareness, and you're taking a lot of responsibility for how you feel. You can reframe forgiveness. Forgiving is not saying that what she did is okay. And it is not, it doesn't require her to be accountable. Forgiveness happens when you look at her choices and you can understand with compassion how she came to make them. This doesn't mean it was right what she did. It means that you have enough information about how the human brain works, how emotions drive us, the circumstances and mindset that she was in, that you can look at it and say, I understand how she as a human being has done what she's done. It wasn't the right thing to do. There were better choices available to her. Right? She could have done something better for herself, better for me, better for our kids. And we're not condoning or approving of her behavior in any way. We just want to get to a deep enough understanding of how the human brain and the human nervous system work so that you can look at her and go, oh, I understand now why she did that. And I'll give you an example here. Like if you have a little kid, it's easier to do this with children than adults. But if your little 5-year-old goes up to another little kid in kindergarten and yanks on their hair and kicks them in the shins, right? You're not going to be like, oh my gosh, my 5-year-old is a monster. What a horrible person, right? You're going to say, oh, I see how he felt really left out and he didn't know how to express himself or communicate that. And he lashed out in anger because of, he felt left out of the game, right? Or when we see it in children, we have this understanding that they don't yet know how to self-regulate and that sometimes they do bad things without bad intentions, right? We can see that it's coming from a place of hurt or lack of knowledge in children. And the reality is that when adults do bad things, it's coming from the same place. It's when we're back in that child brain, when we're in an activated state, that we make bad choices, that we hurt other people. So, David, I'm going to invite you to start with the emotional regulation. I think you're already doing a great job of trying to look at this through the lens of what's good for your kids. And I will tell you this, forgiving her, the path to forgiving her is through a deep understanding of how the human brain and human emotions work and interact. And how does your conscious mind interact with your emotional brain? The best way I know to help somebody understand that is for them to go into their own, start to understand that relationship and those patterns. How do your thoughts impact your emotions? How do your emotions drive your actions? And as you get this deep understanding of your own behavior and how that's all linked up, then you'll be able to turn and look at her and go, oh, I see the thought, the feeling, the action, how they were all related. There will be some compassion that naturally comes up with that understanding, and that's when forgiveness will happen. So to get to forgiveness, the path is to go through yourself first. Right? Get that if you want to understand the human brain, like go into yours. You have this amazing laboratory where you can gather data and understand why humans do what they do and think and feel like they do. So I'd invite you to start with yourself. The Masterclass has some great tools for that. Then it'll be a lot easier to turn and look at her and apply that. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a short Q&A because I have to hop on a call here at 4:30. But I am going to do a series of these. There's one coming up already on Monday. So any of the questions that I don't get through today, I will do on Monday, and then we'll have a couple more coming up. So there'll be lots of opportunities for this. So thank you, David. That was a great question. I want to get to one more because it's similar. So I'm going to paraphrase. This is somebody who was married for 8 years, 2 young kids. This is coming from Mark, and she's already remarried, and he didn't find out about it. And now he's asking, how do I deal with these emotions that drop off? And when my kids talk about the fun things that they do as a family. So Mark, if you're watching this, I want to let you know I'm going to speak to this more on our call on Monday. But there's one piece that I wanted to offer you. So Mark, for you, it's natural to feel this disruption when your kids have this new step parent, especially when you've been totally out of the loop and not included in that conversation. But one thing I will tell you is that there is no such thing as too much love for your children. So it is when you say that you're noticing your kids are talking more and more positively about their stepfather, Mark, that is a blessing. Imagine if they were doing the opposite, if they were talking about how horrible it is to be in that house with him. There cannot be too many people who love children. If a child has more adults that care about them and are present for them and emotionally engaged for them in their lives, that can only help them, it can only support them. However, him being in that role, and especially being in that role without your knowledge and the way she did all of it, it's going to trigger a lot of fear and doubt in you. And Mark mentioned in his email that feeling of being replaced. And so we'll go into this more on Monday. But Mark, I would invite you to take a step back and let's look at and work out the insecurity and the pain and the fear that this is bringing up in you. Because there's a lot that's being triggered there that's going to show us where you have room to heal and feel more confident and secure in yourself as a father, as a man, as a husband. But I just wanted to offer you at least that little piece today that your kids speaking well of him is actually a good thing. Right? If there's going to be another adult in their lives, we want it to be somebody who cares about them, that they feel supported by. And even though that's hard for you, I have seen a lot of men who've had the opposite experience, who the step parent hasn't even been safe for their kids physically sometimes. And I can promise you that that is not a situation you want. So if they like this guy, that's a positive thing. And we're going to work on, and I'll give you tools on Monday for how to work on what is bringing up for you. But for now, you can think of him, he's not going to replace you. He's like an uncle or a godparent. He can be another adult in their life that is a safe, engaged place. And that is not a bad thing for them or for you. Okay, so I'm sorry we can't go deeper into that today. On Monday, we'll talk about it more. Guys, thank you so much for joining today. And please go into the masterclass if you're feeling any big emotions. Like David, you're talking about the grief. We have to go through the grief to get you to the other side of this. So please go to the masterclass. It has some great tools for that. And I will see you guys on Monday. Thank you so much for joining me.